Leonardo was a great Italian, and that was our name originally, Leonardo. But many years ago, when my grandpa came over from Sicily, they changed it at Ellis Island to Leotardo.
Why did they do that for?
Because they're stupid, that's why. And jealous. They disrespected a proud Italian heritage and named us after a ballet costume.
Because they're stupid, that's why. Welcome, my friends, to Cut to Black, a Sopranos Sit Down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every single episode of The Sopranos.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 79 episodes of The Sopranos. We've come all the way up now to Season 6, Episode 14, Stage 5. A lot of numbers there. Can you help me straighten this up, Jim? Who put this thing together?
This episode was written by Terrence Winter. That's a name you've heard before. And directed by Alan Taylor, which is another name you've heard before. So, yes, we're getting down. The episode count's dropping. So I'm sure a lot of the writers are like, give me an episode. Get me an episode before this thing's done already. Jesus.
I didn't get my Emmy yet. She got her Emmy. Where's my Emmy?
Where's my Emmy? Come on.
Yeah. There's
and it aired April 15th, 2007.
Very good, very good. So I'll mention this even though it's later in the episode. In this episode, we have what I presume to be the very last iteration of Tony Soprano going down to get the newspaper. And
Yes.
It is kind of a meta moment when he says, like, no more, like, where it's like, he says he's never going to do it again, but I bet it's the last time it happens in the show, because that would be such a thing that they would do. He's annoyed that he runs into the FBI agents down there, but that's not really central. What central is, it's a bit sad that we've gotten to this point, but I feel all the richer for it all the same.
Yeah, last time getting the paper, it's too dangerous. Has been for years. And I think that might even be more meta, because I feel like that might even have been something people were saying, like whether it be the online discourse or critics, like, what, Tony's so exposed. That's a perfect spot for a hit or whatever. I mean, we've seen him in the past. Remember when he's afraid, even going back to season 2, when he walked out and he got a little spooked because then Big Pussy rolled up. Thought maybe he was going to get whacked. But yeah, it's too dangerous. That's the last time getting the paper. So all good things come to an end. That's another another sign. Go ahead.
Yes. No, sorry. I was just going to say, speaking of things that are meta, I mean, the way that this episode opens, Jim.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to give credit to it, because it's like a garage. You got a Baldwin walking in, and I'm like, shit, there's a Baldwin in this now? Who's this character that we're only just being introduced to? This is so... And I had the actual thought, this doesn't feel right. This feels like it's from some other movie or TV show, because it's got a different vibe to it. And I was like, who directed this? And all these thoughts are in like 30 seconds before it is revealed that it is, in fact, Cleaver. And it's such a great reveal because we've heard about it for so long, and seeing it, like, who would have even thought that it could ever actually happen? But it has actually happened. It was kind of it was like we see this maimed person hung up on chains, but it was kind of more the way it was shot and put together that made me go like, this is not The Sopranos. I thought I opened a different file to watch it. So that was very well done.
Yeah, because even like stylistically and just even the lighting and the grading and stuff like that. And then, yes, it all becomes clear. This is some sort of horror movie, and if you remember Christopher's project, Cleaver, you did it, Chris. You made a movie finally. Ever since remember those days when he threw away his computer, but he stuck to it, and here we are, executive producer. Did I lose you?
Hello.
Did I lose you? Oh, all right. Hold on.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was sorry to give you another point to edit in the YouTube video and the thing. And if this is still in the YouTube video or the thing, hello, this is the secret content. It was cutting out a fair bit, like in the previous recording, and then now it was cutting out. But I didn't hear a single thing you said there, unfortunately.
Okay. I was just saying what a ride Chris has been on.
It's doing it still.
Ah, shit. Well, okay. Let me see. Maybe I'll redo my connection.
I can't hear any of this. I'm sorry.
All right, I'll be right back.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can still hear you.
One more time. Can you still hear me?
For the moment, at least, yes.
Right, let's see how it goes. Oh, yeah. All I was saying is that what a journey Christopher Moltisanti's been on. You know, we followed him from throwing away his computer and giving up his Hollywood dreams to here he is, an executive producer on a real movie. He did it. Good for him.
And what you just said can be taken as like it's not the best movie, obviously, but like I still, when Tony says to him like, you did it, you made something, I've had that feeling before, and I've never even made a feature, and I'm honestly like, good on you, Chris, you done did something.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, they're in the edit bay or whatever. They're watching a cut. We get little Carmine's there. We have the guy with the cleaver hand. He kills his boss, and I guess that's where the movie ends. That's
yeah,
cleaver to the head. Oh, and then they have the shot of the cross and the, I guess, keychain. I didn't know this. This is on the Wikipedia, that I guess that's the same keychain that Furio got for AJ in when he went to Italy or came back from Italy or something like that. It's a weird little detail, but that's what I'm told. I don't know. I didn't double check it, but that's what I'm told.
Yeah, it's well, the thing is, it's got like the divine and the propane. So
yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't study it too closely, but I love that The Sopranos gets to play around with this type of scene. And the whole way through production, it's been great when they're like pitching it and all these different parts. But this is one of them when they get to talk about the film and they're in the edit bay, like you said. And like, I can't make out all of the stuff on the walls, but one of the things is a poster for a film called Night of the Panda. And it's like a horror font. And it's like clearly like, this is not where we make Scorsese films. This is where we make this kind of films. And I kind of love how everyone is on board with what they're doing and what they're going for. And yeah, it's just a fun atmosphere. And Christopher does understand some things about filmmaking now, because he's like, they're talking about how they want to add a scene, and he's like, fuck, that'll be 2 more days of shooting.
Yeah.
And he actually knows something. So this is all pretty fun.
Yes. I think there's even one of the guys says, this could make more money than the pornos we make. So
yes, I love that.
And then, yeah, Tony calls about like some air mattresses or whatever, some other crime that he needs Chris involved in. But of course, Chris is in his movie right now, and just kind of another show of like how Tony doesn't fully get it. And if he's not like fully supportive in the way Christopher wants, it's just kind of another disconnect, because this has always been one of his passions, and Tony, of course, is like a surrogate father for him. But yeah, so from there we move Johnny Sack. Seems like we haven't seen him in a long time. He's in prison and he's not looking great. We find out that he's been fighting cancer in jail. Much like I mean, I guess not that Junior was in jail that long, but I don't know. You just start withering away once you're out of sight, out of mind. It just reminded me of like when Junior was going through his legal stuff, and then things like health wise became real, and he started deteriorating. We check in with Johnny Sack, and he's kind of going through the same thing. We find out it's stage 4, and he's given basically 3 months to live.
Yeah, give or take. And yeah, and he says like he started exercising and eating right and everything when he went inside. And what was the point of any of all that? And meets the family, meets Ginny, and like we've seen even though obviously Tony and Carmela, their relationship is very central to the show. Even though he's been an antagonist for a lot of it, we've seen a lot of Johnny's relationship with Ginny, and we see even more of it here, and with his family. And like Johnny was like this cray like trigger happy, as is brought up by his brother-in-law type, like trigger happy guy for a long time. And now we just get to watch him and his family mourn his slow passing and go through the stages of grief. And I'm like, this is very Sopranos, because this character could have been shot in the head a few seasons ago, and it's like they go, well, how about we make you just hang out with the character for a few seasons and then you kind of watch him die of cancer instead? How about we do that, because we're the Sopranos?
Yeah, and especially like the added like he's in prison, so the extra part of not only just getting that news, but having like guards that are sitting there, they have to be in the room, so they're getting it, and then you have to take the ride back, and they're like, oh, how are you doing? It's just some guy. And then also like you're seeing how regular life goes on as you're being brought back into the prison that you need to be in. And then when you need to talk to your family about this news, and you get yelled at for physical contact. It's all like, when it rains, it pours, I guess. It's all really rough stuff for poor Johnny Sack. I mean, maybe if he didn't cry, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it is the same marshals or whatever that actually ripped him away from his family at his wedding are also ones who are like, hey, how you doing with the cancer? So that's fun. And it's also like there's other people also clearly like in dying or in wheelchairs, because you go to prison and then you just get old and die. So great job, everyone involved. It's a bit rough, and it is like, so we stay with him for a while, like it's a fair bit, and then we cut back to the Sopranos just eating dinner. They don't even know, they don't even care. It's like, it's a great way of I don't know. Just those few scenes makes you go like, oh, Tony's really lucky. Too bad he's so, such a dick to everyone around him.
Yeah, he does. Like, and I guess that could be said about anyone. Like you don't realize like how lucky you are in a lot of cases. And I know it's all relative, but more often than not, you get caught up in your own kind of bullshit that's not a big deal, but it seems like such a big deal. And he does. After his family leaves, he does, hey, fuck it. Can I bum one of those ciggy butts? What the hell? Who do I care? I'm on oxygen. I might as well smoke a little bit here.
Yeah. I think I was going to say Breaking Bad stole this, but they clearly, I don't think they did. It's probably just a thing that happens. Like when you find out you have like the worst cancer, you're either going to stop stop or start smoking, whichever one, really, because it's like your life is out of your control, and they even go into it in the episode. But in Breaking Bad, there is a scene where he finds out he has cancer, and later he's like, I would like to smoke some weed or whatever, because he never smoked in his life, and then like, oh, what the fuck?
Okay. And then back to the dinner. We do get some information here. We find out Finn is now out of the picture.
Hell yeah!
See you later, you piece of shit.
But we will not be talking about that. Much like, what is it that she says, Meadow? Like, I shan't be talking about Finn, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
I feel similarly. Let's just not.
They're talking about the cast and crew screening that's going to be coming up. AJ makes a comment about wanting to meet celebrities. I love how like Blanca is just like annoyed with AJ through this episode, but they never really like follow through on it. It's just it just feels like a real relationship thing. I'm sure it would just be annoying to be in a relationship with AJ, but you also get to go in that nice jacuzzi and stay in that nice house sometimes. So maybe that's what the ends justify the means. I like that. There's that quick moment where Tony has like indigestion, and almost everyone's like looks at him like he's about to die.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with Blanca, it's like he says like, "Oh, it's gonna be cool to hang out with celebs," and she's like, "What? So you can sleep with Paris Hilton?" And he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And yeah, everyone's like, "Did you have a fight?"
He's
But
like,
yeah,
"I
like you
don't
said, it's not really explained at all. It's just like just checking in, going like, yeah, things aren't all jacuzzis and pool parties in the Soprano house, and AJ's still gonna be AJ when you wake up the next day. So it's only gonna be so good.
Yes, yeah. And then we meet the orderly Warren. Is it Warren Feldman? He's played by Sidney Pollack, who is a director. Sopranos likes to do that because also Elliot, Melfi's psychiatrist, is played by Peter Bogdanovich, who's also a director. Sidney Pollack did pass away from cancer like about a year after this episode aired. He directed Tootsie and what was his? Out of Africa. A lot of these movies I've heard of that I've never seen, but but yeah, I mean, I know the name. I know the name. And when he showed up, I did recognize him. I was like, wait, who is this guy again? He's someone, and he was someone.
Yeah, I may have recognized him. Not that I knew, but he was the father of Will on Will and Grace. Just saying.
Oh, and even though I know it's The Sopranos, and we talk about this a lot, that on The Sopranos you start to learn like not to look for certain things that other TV shows might do. But even though I know that, in my head I'm thinking like, is this guy just a liar and he's like giving him bad advice, or he's one of those orderlies that smothers people in the hospice?
Yeah.
Like I can't help yet, even though I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. That's not what this show is. But I'm waiting for the big reveal that he's just a crazy orderly, and then he grabs a pillow and smothers Johnny Sack or whatever. Or you find out like, oh, he's not a doctor at all. He's a crazy person, and he gives people the worst advice ever. But yeah, I mean, he starts playing a part through this because he is a oncologist who killed his cheating wife and like an unlucky mailman that happened to be there, and like her aunt or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you're right. It's like you might expect something different, but he kind of says when he's introducing himself, changing the sheets, like, let's get this out of the way. Killed her aunt too. Killed the mailman, and that's why I'm not allowed to say stuff. But he is obvious. I would say he's more. He's obviously more experienced just from his age than the kid doctor they call Gupta. But there's also this like high-end cancer expert who talks at presentations and has looked into this case, and he gives an estimate of 3 months. And this guy comes in like, nah, I'd say it'd be fine for years. Like, and like, I at no point do I think he's a liar, but he's also just like, he doesn't know the facts as much, and he does clearly enjoy being, well, not enjoy, but like he wishes he could be more of a doctor, but he enjoys at least having some influence on what's going on in the medical department, and he, getting to talk about that in the same way that, mobsters on the inside would tell stories about that and use that in a way. It's like he gets some connection to that at least.
Yes, yeah, it's like his previous life before being in prison. You get a taste of like what you were outside. So yeah, it's an interesting character and kind of just like an interesting like through line through this episode, and especially the way like Johnny is telling these like mob stories now. I mean, I guess it is kind of like this, hey, fuck it, I'm dying anyways, because it just seems like such a thing that everyone would really geek out about. He's openly telling stories about Carmine, but then I guess Carmine's dead, so it's not like this evidence is going to come out or whatever. And it kind of ties in a weird way to where we see Phil by the end of this episode, where he's thinking like he's got regrets for keeping his mouth shut, doing 20 years for what? So this this whole episode, I mean, obviously death is such a huge thing through this whole episode, and then like a strong feeling of like legacy and what do you leave this world as you get closer to your death.
Yeah,
And I guess that's kind of what Sopranos is always. That's always been there.
for sure. I also thought when he was telling stories about the mob days, I also thought they were going to do like a TV thing that they obviously didn't do. But I thought when they had like this mob expert on TV, I thought that was going to be something building up to. This is so stupid. I can't believe I thought this. But the Johnny Sack would like write his tell-all memoirs or something so that he would get some money to leave his family. That's such a stupid idea that if they pitched that in the room, I'm glad they shot it down. But just the fact that he's telling this and it's like, whoa, everyone's super into it. It's like, and we see people are into it on TV. Everyone loves hearing mob stories. So like, if he obviously that would be bad, but maybe if he only wrote about dead people, he still is gonna die anyway, and he might leave some money for his family. But they didn't do that because they're better writers than I am.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, like you're bringing up your bad idea. I had the bad idea that the orderly was a secret killer. So it's like,
man, we should write a show. Which reminds me, in this very episode, let's do some integrated marketing here, Jim. In this episode, they try to sell Cleaver as what is it? It's something meets something.
like Saw meets Godfather, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not in this episode they mentioned that, but at least in previous episodes they've called it that.
Yeah. So, like, we do a podcast called Blank Meets Blank where we draw two random things and we create something that is ridiculous. Like, we come up with a bad idea. That's what you just heard. Magic at work. Us coming up with bad ideas. We're great at it. But then we make that into an actual thing. And by an actual thing, I mean a podcast episode where we outline the plot of it. So we just brainstorm a whole show in each episode of Blank Meets Blank. We have 5 episodes out right now, and we're taking a hiatus to produce the rest of those. So if you're interested at all, I mean, you're probably sick of us shoving this down your throat, but please do give it a try. Search Blank Meets Blank on your podcatcher of choice. And please rate and review. That's
a great call out.
Yeah.
But yeah. Then we have the scene you were talking about where Tony goes to get the paper. Agent Harris rolls up with the guy from House of Cards.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, exactly. And he there's like he like looks around because he was just told last episode that they're building a RICO case or whatever, and so he's expecting like maybe this is it. Like they said last episode, is this it? Maybe this is it, but it isn't. They're just there to chat and tell the same terrorism story, the same anti-terrorism story that I've heard before, and it's been going on for a long time now. And I still don't believe that anything will come from it. So there you go. I stand by that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it, they do like in a not so subtle way. They're like, we approach Christopher with this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is almost also insinuating like, oh, what else is Chris talking about? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that plants that seed or not. But anyways, Tony's also very upset because now it's like, I'm not getting that paper no more. You tell that Pollock to get here early. She can clean someone else's toilets.
Is it because they bring up the possibility of his daughter dying in a terror attack? Like, is that why he's upset? Or is it just any interaction with the FBI?
I think, it's probably all of the above. I completely forgot about that. But yeah, you're right. Like, has your daughter take the tunnels or whatever. So, and we already know Tony was obsessed with those shipping containers at least that one time. Yeah. So it's something that's hitting home for him.
He was obsessed with it once and then forgot about it. So we get to the actual screening of the premiere, and such a fun time for everyone involved. I love this. We get to see Carmine and Christopher have their speech, and when the director goes up to say his bit, they just start the film. Yeah, or someone just grabs the microphone.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, and such a good moment.
The writer, of course, is like waiting to be mentioned and isn't mentioned, even though he wrote this whole script, as far as I can tell. The Tony gets shout out and all the investors get shout outs. Anyway, they watch it and it's like they seem to be like in the Soprano basement filming it. It's like the same angles and everything with the bosses in the basement shouting and everything and throwing things. And I love how all the mob people in AJ too, they're all just kind of like, yeah, looking at each other like, this is great. And I'm like, this could be a success, at least like cult-wise, because you know, you always try to make The Sopranos is great because it appeals to everyone. Everyone can find something in The Sopranos that they enjoy.
Yeah.
But Cleaver is great because it appeals to exactly the type of people who are depicted in Cleaver. And it appeals to stupid people or people who don't care that much about their media having nuance. Not necessarily stupid at all. You
Yeah.
know, we're very up our own asses in how we consume media. But like, yeah, it's just that they're just loving it, like really surface level consuming all of it. And I think someone could also enjoy it on like so bad it's good level too. So everyone else is just like, this is clearly you, Tony, and this is clearly this. And Tony's like, nah. And like him and Christopher look at each other and they're like, ha, great. And it's only later that this actually falls into place.
Well, and I like that it's like AJ, it's almost like he has a delayed reaction to getting that it's Tony. It's like when he throws a thing at the wall, I think AJ's like, oh, wait a minute. Because so even AJ's getting it, and then Carmela has to tell Tony, like, but I think that's also perfect because you're not going to see yourself. Like, you're not going to always see like the bad parts of yourself. That it's always easy to look at someone else and be like, oh, this is, you do this, and this wrong. Even though deep down you might know that about yourself, you're not going to see it. So I think it does ring very true that Carmela has to be like, no, that's you. And he's like, what? And then he like kind of plays with it in good fun. But then, of course, then there are other parts of the movie that are him where it's the boss is having sex with the main character's fiance, and kind of Ro reads that first and looks at Carmilla. There's just a quick bit where Paulie's just talking on the phone during the movie, and I guess that's just because to show that Paulie's one of those assholes that'll just answer his phone and be talking even during a premiere screening.
Yeah. And it's also like because they're depicting like mob stuff, and he's like literally saying like it's things they need to do in the world of the mob, like showing how connected it is. But like, imagine being Rosalie, watching this. Like, her whole family just got fucked by this life. Her son got murdered, and then you watch a film that starts with someone getting murdered, like in exactly the way that it actually did happen, even if she's in denial about it or whatever. It's just very strange. And then at the after party later, someone like gets arrested for violating their bail or whatever because it is so linked. Like, all of these factors would probably help in the marketing of Cleaver. Like, did you hear at the launch party of Cleaver, someone got arrested for the bail thing? Did you hear that the story by a guy is actually part of the Italian mob? Like, this would all help sell it.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, then we have the party. And well, no, and I love, I mean, it kind of pays off a little bit more later on, but they make the fiance like Asian. And then that's like Christopher's defense. Like, he thought he was slick. Like, oh, that'll throw everyone off the scent. It's like, of course it's not Adriana. I mean, Adriana wasn't Asian.
Well, that's the thing as well. I don't think any of this is intentional on Christopher's part, because I genuinely believe him when he's talking about like, it was just an idea. I don't know where ideas come from. And that's the thing that the reason Tony believes this towards the end is, as he says to Melfi later on, like, I know too much about how the subconscious works, which I read as like, yeah, Christopher might not be doing this intentionally, but he's still doing it. Like, it's still happening there.
I will say, I think just based on going back to like whenever it was, I forget if it was just the beginning of this season or if it was like the end of season 5. I think Chris knows exactly what he's doing when they first like kidnap JT from like his speech or whatever, and they want him to write the movie. And the way Chris is like, the cunt fiance was boning his boss the whole time. I feel like at that point he's very aware of what he's doing, but I'm sure I do believe him in this episode though, where now you're past the point where you've been working on the script and he's more in the mindset of like they're creating a movie and they're editing it and they're looking at it in a different light, where he's kind of forgotten in a weird way where it all initially came from. But I mean, again, like we're just talking semantics now, but for whatever reason, that's just my read on it, because I feel like given that scene earlier in the show where he first kind of comes up with this movie idea and it's the way he's like focusing on it, he knows exactly what he's doing.
Now, that's interesting, yeah, because that could be totally right, and it's probably open to interpretation. But I think in the same way that Tony doesn't see himself in the film,
Yeah.
Christopher doesn't see himself in the script. It's just creativity can be so therapeutic, but usually you try to make it not a one-to-one relation, but he's so bad at it, let's be honest, that
Yeah.
he just translates his life and just writes it down and goes, yeah, but he doesn't even understand that he's doing it in my mind. But I'd have to rewatch that earlier scene. I remember that as a great scene. And it was actually part of, what's it called? Making of Cleaver, this DVD
Oh,
featurette.
yeah, Making Cleaver, the
Yeah.
Sopranos featurette. It is on YouTube.
Yeah, I watched it. It was it's got a lot of clips from like the episodes. It's basically just a little mockumentary that they did, and it's very comedic because it's just like they clearly just filmed themselves making the scene that is shown in the episode, and then also made sure they had like director's chairs that said like Chris Moltisanti and all this. And so Carmine, Chris, and the director are just sitting there bullshitting and talking about how they came up with the idea and making it sound much better than it was. And there's some hilarious lines in there where they're talking about the director, like, oh, a lot of the directors we were looking at, they weren't really in our budget. But then we heard about this up and coming young director, and we got in touch with him. And he knew this guy, like, so, and it's very like it's almost like The Office-esque in how it's put together. I recommend it, even though it's very comedic rather than anything else. But that's how you'd want to put that together, I think.
Yes, yeah. I haven't watched it recently. I got to rewatch it. We
Like
do have.
sorry, yeah, I was gonna say, for example, when they're talking about like the director saying like, oh yes, this is the movie, this is the part where all the B movie fanboys are gonna go crazy in the theater, and the others are like mishearing him and first like going like, oh, what you say, B movie? And then it's like femboys, and he's like, yeah, femboys. As femboys, like that's the joke.
We have a quick moment again. I guess Blanca is still mad at AJ, and the initial moment here where Tony like congratulates Chris is kind of like sweet and genuine, which is nice. Where it's like, hey, you like you'd mentioned this earlier. You made a movie 100 years from now, people are going to be watching this, and it's good. You finished the project. I mean, once things get more clear, I guess it's not that kind of comes back to Tony, and it's not a cool thing anymore.
Yeah, very true. And so at the same time, we're also getting into the other big thing that's going on, which is leadership now. Obviously, with the whole cancer situation, it gets even more relevant who's going to take over in New York. So we get a bit of that with Phil talking to Tony, and he's like talking about, I don't know if they get into it there. He says that being a boss is a young man's game, and Tony just wants someone in charge because everyone's like paying light, basically. Everyone's like, no one's really in charge, so the money isn't flowing as it should.
Yeah, and I think they kind of they'd guessed that this is where things would go with a war, and now it's starting to happen. But now, yeah, even though like there was a time where Tony probably wouldn't want Phil in that spot, but now he's kind of the lesser two evils. I think they mention Doc Santoro again here, or maybe that comes up during the news that happens. I do like before Larry Boy gets arrested at the premiere, they have a quick line from like one of the ladies that's like, I actually, that actors don't make up what they say. And then someone else is like, yeah, no, that's true. They actually, they're like it's a revelation to people that there's a script and that people aren't just hanging out, like just riffing to make a movie.
Yeah. And then we do get to this scene where we see a TV show, which I started imagining this weird plot line because it felt a little bit out of place. We have series writer Matthew Weiner appearing again, which he has before, as like a mafia expert and author on TV, on, I guess, a real show. I'm not familiar with the show, but yeah, it's like a real interview show, and he's there with one real mafia expert, and then we have Matthew.
He's there with Geraldo Rivera, who is, he's a famous investigative journalist.
Right. And they kind of have a goofy bit where they talk over each other because of the delay. You and me are familiar with that, but yeah, they're just kind of, it's basic. This is kind of an information dump, but kind of a done in a fun way, I guess. Like, is the point of this? This feels like it could have been added after everything to give a bit more clarity on what's going on. I don't think it was, but it feels a bit like that.
Yeah, just a quick catch up with some of the New York people, because I mean, like I had mentioned in the last discussion, when we drop in with Phil, we see a couple new faces, and I mean, maybe we've seen Doc Santoro before, but he's clearly become more important to what's going on now that there is this power vacuum and who's going to step in. And it's about that. And then they have just this reveal that Elliot's the one watching TV, but he's kind of like a fanboy now. Like, I guess through his therapy with Melfi and hearing about Patient X and Tony Soprano, now he's like all in, because he's like, what, I called this Doc Santoro thing a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of talk in the Soprano sessions about this episode and how it could be looked at as the Sopranos writers also kind of looking at themselves in a way and wondering like their legacy, and did we make a pretentious mob show that people just want to see the blood and guts? Because I mean, they mention it early when they want to add the scenes, like, oh, people are all about the sexy kills, we need more blood. And then they kind of talk about like there's a scene coming up where little Carmine's talking about his dream and what he reads from that. And I think there's an interesting take to be had of like how they are poking fun at themselves a bit, and where their own stance is on like, how will this show be remembered? And is it a show where we're too pretentious and up our own ass and didn't have enough kills, or did we just try to justify being up our own ass because we threw in some violence and kills? So and this episode is a great example of that, because there's a cool kill in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they have Cleaver where they talk about how they need to add more violence, and then they have this super violent scene later, which has a lot of blood splattering everywhere. And I find that interesting, and it's also like this is in many ways it's very Sopranos, because it's a very serious episode with what's going on with Johnny dying, but it's also very comedic with everything with Cleaver and like the TV thing we just mentioned, where they have like a book like The Wise Guide to Wise Guys or whatever. And like, so it is like distancing itself, looking at it like a silly thing. And then also the very serious parts of it and death and everything. So yeah, very Sopranos in short.
Yeah. And then I think even in this next scene, when Ginny's brother goes to see Johnny and they're talking about Feldman and his prognosis, I believe Johnny basically does say like, how will I be remembered? And that kind of comes back to where we're at with Phil later on, and then plus Tony just in general with how he's dealing with this movie. So it's overflowing this episode with this theme.
Yeah. And so after all of those scenes that we just mentioned, we have basically Tony, the pin dropping for Tony. Is that the expression? I think so. No?
Yeah.
The what dropping? The ball dropping. Something's dropping. Yeah. And he realizes, because Carmela lays it all out too clear for him to ignore, that it's basically just you in there. And that's very agitating for Tony. And he goes into the Bing and just has a chat about it and tries to suss out if other people have also gotten that impression. And because if it's just Carmilla, that would be one thing. But I guess that's what's going on here, right?
Well, yeah, and what's great too, thinking about it, because we've been talking a lot about people's blind spots and what they pick up. Because even though Carm is the one that tells Tony like that's you and points out to him when he's in his bathrobe in the basement freaking out, she does mention here that Rose the one that had to tell her that the fiance scene is Adriana. So she still has her own blind spot that she had needed someone else to tell her about. And yeah, you're right. It starts to make it clear to Tony. So then, yeah, Tony has to go. He talks to Silvio here. Wait, I'm trying to see. Am I on the right scene? Yeah. They're talking about the movie. So yeah, and I think still has the line where it's like, I never thought of Christopher like Marty, but oh wow, like comparing
Yes.
him to Scorsese. Oh, and I should point out that and Carmela does not only the Adriana thing, but she's like, this is a revenge fantasy, Tony. It
Yeah.
ends with the boss getting killed. So that's the extra exclamation point here. Not only does Christopher think of him as like a bully piece of shit, but also he'd like to see him dead.
Yep, exactly. And so Christopher then he's in a diner. I guess this is a new character, his new sponsor, I assume. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, they just kind of mention like sober friend almost because he points out to the FBI and he's like, there's my other sober friend. So yeah, it's like a sponsor, and it does kind of explain Christopher's absence, and it's actually better than I guess what I expected, like from him not being around in the first episode and not being around too much before. It actually is a healthy choice. And I think even the scene before this, Silvio makes a mention of him not coming around the Bing or whatever. Because, he shouldn't be. I mean, obviously, he shouldn't even be around those people, but he shouldn't be hanging out at bars either and around drugs and stuff if he's someone in recovery. So all that stuff makes sense. But yeah, it is weird that the way they dropped this character in, because I mean, I don't know about you, but this guy's very recognizable to me because he's Shooter McGavin and Happy Gilmore, of course. He's popped up in a bunch of other stuff. So I think even I didn't steal this from the Sopranos session. They bring it up as well, but I did think the same thing where it's like, oh, is he playing himself? Because all these other, it's feasible at this point that Christopher will be having a sit down with this actor guy and maybe, for some reshoots or putting him in his next project or something,
Well, he talks about, Christopher says, which is quite funny and quite sweet, that he's like, he feels like he's living someone else's life, which reminds me of last season or earlier this season, everyone trying to live different lives and not being able to. And he also says like, or maybe it's the other guy who says like, oh, you're not used to the success yet, or like, and he says like, I know that feeling or whatever. So I was also like, wait, what are you successful at? Just being not addicted anymore, or what's going on? But yeah, it's a cool scene because this guy, like you said, he's very recognizable. Even if he's just in this scene in the whole of The Sopranos, it's still like, good choice there. He plays it really well, and he basically lays out. I think they say here that it was 3 months ago he came into a meeting with that woman. So we can then assume that 3 months have passed since last part of the season, right?
Yeah, that does make sense. Unless they had another relapse. But yeah, you're right. It's the more obvious thing.
Good point. Yeah, that is definitely possible.
Because it's weird because it feels like it'd been longer than 3 months. But I mean, I guess a lot can happen in 3 months.
Yeah, that's true. And let's see. So how does this scene end? Yeah, the fact that he notices that the others are resenting him a bit for not being around.
And they're not going to understand it. Paulie especially. I like because there's still obviously that Chris and Paulie thing. But yeah, he's making a healthy decision, but it's it's not going to work out well with the company he keeps, especially Tony, who are reading it in a different way. And then we check back in with Johnny. He's telling his Carmine stories, smoking some cigs, and Ginny and his daughter come in and kind of catch him. Like I was saying before, I was surprised at how open he was. Like they're telling like a hit story about a guy who was fucking someone's wife, and Carmine wouldn't approve it because he's making so much money. But then, a few years later, he's like, you know what? Remember that guy we talked about? Take him out. And they're like, because he wasn't making money anymore. Like they're us,
Yes.
We love the mob stories and we're trying to put it together and get to vicariously live that life. So yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. And so he's smoking a cigarette at the start. Ginny and his daughter comes in, puts it out because they're upset, but she starts talking about how, this miracles happen and this negative thinking is probably, how you got like this in the first place, which I feel like would be pretty insulting if you're in that situation. He brings up like, what about all the 6-year-olds with leukemia? I guess they did too much negative thinking. And then she just storms out and she lights another cigarette. He lights another cigarette.
Yeah, and then I think from here, we have the dinner scene, right, with Silvio,
Sure do. We sure
and
do.
Jerry Torchiano, and what are they? Oh, they're bullshitting, and then this guy's even getting a little fresh about Phil, almost in a very similar to my estimation of John Sacramone as a man has plummeted. He brings up like, oh yeah, he got the role, and then his heart gave out, and Silvio's like, yeah, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He like his heart
It's
literally
a
gave out.
metaphor.
He lost his balls, and he's like, yeah, why don't you just say that? And then their dates come back, and there's this great scene where Silvio's talking to one of the girls, and then it gets like silent and like a high pitched sound as blood sprays all over him, and he doesn't know what's going on. Even after like the second shot, it takes a moment for him to realize, okay, the guy's getting killed. And it does harken back to what Bobby was just talking about in the previous episode. I don't think you even hear it. It just kind of happens. So,
yeah. Which is a line that I forgot to mention at the time, but I felt like, and I'm just a vague prediction here, but I feel like this is a reference to the end of The Sopranos, and I feel like it's laying a lot of groundwork for episodes to come, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to put too much of an exclamation point on it because the episode doesn't even really, like the last one we watched, like it happens and they cut away to something else and they cut back. But it's, I mean, when you see what happens here, it feels like it's completely connected to what Bobby's talking about.
Yeah. And you know what? Watching the scene, I think the scene I described as a bit silly on the TV, it's probably necessary because I probably wouldn't have been able to follow what's going on here without it. Because last episode, we had like a welcome home party and there were like loads of people and everyone was bullshitting. And I was like, I don't know who's who and what's what. So what I've gathered is this guy, Jerry, he might be the guy to take over. That's what Phil wants. Phil called him his protege. But then now this guy is kind of talking shit about Phil.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was breaking balls there at the party, call him his favorite turd, or that was someone else. I'm not sure. But either way, he's clearly like one of the potentials, and he very much gets taken out here, which is funny because it does seem like no one really wants it, but then all of a sudden you get blood spattered all over your face.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And then I like that Silvio is just like, once he realizes what's happening, he's like, come on, let's go. Because it's like, he's not, what is he going to do? Like fight back for this guy or something? It's just I guess is a friend of his, but it's in New York. And I kind of like that. It's always, it's almost like the thing we want or what you would think a Sopranos fan would want. Cause you're watching a mob show. So you always want to see the mob war break out, and it's happening. But it's happening off screen with characters we don't know. I mean, this was on screen, but it's happening with these characters we just met, and it's happening in New York. And meanwhile, we're in New Jersey. So it's yet another kind of like fuck you a little bit from David Chase. He's like, oh, yeah, no, don't worry. This is a mob show. Mob wars are happening. They might not just be happening with our characters, but they're happening. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and the guy who does it is, we don't see his face. And I'm not sure if they did one of the classic old pay any old fuck to do it, or if they got a real guy to do it. I'm guessing a real guy, but he was just not dressed mobster-like. Well, maybe he was. I don't know. It was like kind of a tracksuit or whatever. But yeah, it was kind of. It's interesting how it because of who they are. It doesn't really matter who did it. We know who would have ordered it, so that's who really did it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's. Not that it's not really a direct connection, because I mean you could probably connect a mob hit scene to many mob movies, but since it's fresh in my mind, I don't know if you've watched it yet, but The Irishman is now out on Netflix, and it just vaguely reminded me of that a bit, because that's a lot about someone who commits hits and death and stuff like that. So I recommend it. Highly recommend it. It is a long one. It's 3.5 hours, but
yeah, that's the one thing everyone says about it. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah,
tons of Sopranos people pop up, which is to be expected, because I mean, remember when we watched Goodfellas after season 1, we saw like 40 Sopranos actors, and that was before getting into later seasons where more Goodfellas actors popped up in Sopranos.
Yeah, I think if we were still, if we still had seasons to go, we'd revive our tradition of watching a film between seasons because it feels like it's, one of those films was connected almost as much as the upcoming Sopranos prequel, I think. But I haven't seen it, so what do I know? Next scene, we have Tony meeting up with little Carmine at a golf course, and Tony's basically trying to convince him to take charge, even though Doc just made a move to take charge.
Yep.
Tony wants little Carmine. So why do you think that is?
I guess it's all the only thing I can gauge from, at least from a viewer's standpoint, is these are the devils. At least we know. So I guess I assume that the devils Tony knows.
Yeah.
Doc doesn't look like we haven't had a lot of interactions with him as the audience. He doesn't look like he'd be that crazy, but I guess if he's doing stuff like this and Tony, they're kind of showing there's apprehension from Tony to want him in the spot.
Yeah, he calls him senile, and he doesn't like that Silvio was used as a diversion, as he calls it.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So, like, that's kind of enough for me to be like, yeah, okay, if this is what Tony wants, then we don't want Doc to be the guy.
Yeah, and this is a really great scene because, like, Carmine's great at bullshit, but then like he has something actually genuine here that he says, and it's something that also gets Tony thinking. It is like absurd. Like I keep bringing up every time little Carmine's on screen. I'm like, how is this guy still around? Remember this thing? And this is where Tony basically goes like, oh yeah, I remember that thing. Do you want to be boss? Like we'll make you boss. And he doesn't want it. And he tells this story about a dream, which should be really boring because who wants to hear about other people's dreams? But Tony gets really into it, and the metaphor or whatever, we love a metaphor here, is that it's happiness he needs to gather, not like fucking bullets or whatever. He does like it's not about being boss. He needs to find happiness, and that's the thing with Tony, of course, that is constantly going on. And it's very present in this episode that being boss is, terrible. Johnny mentions it, and everyone is aware to a certain extent. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Tony comes in going like, you should do this. And even though he doesn't mean to, Carmine kind of comes off saying, no, you should do this. Like, you should focus more on trying to be happy. Is he going to take that advice? No, it's the Sopranos.
Well, and I just love the idea that this is the show's one of the show's fools, one of the idiots that they always play up for laughs, and they give him this moment that's very deep in understanding, where Tony takes a certain read from the dream initially because he's with his dad who's 100 years old, and he gives him a box and he's disappointed because it's empty. And then Tony's like, well, yes, of course, that means you need to fill up that hole inside yourself, become a boss like your father. But he has the better read from it. No, I should be happy. Between that and also, he has he has a daily routine where he comes home and skinny dips, and then his wife comes. I mean, it sounds like a glorious, like what a way to end every day. You go skinny dipping in a nice pool, and then your wife comes out, gives you a drink, and then you go up in a nice warm bed. Then you have another drink and a sweet night with your wife. But he was exhausted. He didn't get to have that, and he listened again to some advice like, I don't want to be the richest widow in Long Island. Which the only other thing is just kind of like, we've also been told you cannot leave this life, but I guess he's playing a little bit of the middle. He's not saying I'm not going to do this. I'm not a part of this, but I'm not going to be boss, and I'm not going to like get involved in that shit. I'll keep, I guess he does the movie business, like those types of deals, club promotions from the stuff they talk about. I guess as long as he's making money, everyone's kind of cool with it.
Yeah, I mean, he can't be a made man, right? Like, there's no way.
I don't know. I feel like maybe he is just because his father was boss. But then again, I don't know. That's a good question.
AJ's never going to be made, though. So
that's true.
Because he was just fucking around down in Miami when Tony first went to see him to sort of get things settled with his dad or whatever. So I always got the impression that he was just fucking around, having his jacuzzi life, and then all of this happened. I did want to mention that he does the, what was it, the I forget what it was, but we referenced it already. When he says the wrong word, he's great for always saying the wrong word.
Yes.
And even in his sweet story, he says that in his dream he gave his father a mellifluous box. And I was like, if I don't know what a word means, then he definitely doesn't know what a word means. And I had to Google it, and it's when you're describing a sound, it's pleasingly smooth and musical to hear. So her low mellifluous voice. A box cannot be mellifluous. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, shit. Now I'm spaced on what they call that. Where you
saying the wrong shit.
Yes. Whatever. But god damn it. I'm trying to see if I can find it real quick.
It's great though. They do it a lot, as
like
we've noticed.
Like a malaprism or something like that.
Malapsism?
Yeah. I'm like I'm doing his thing where
yes. Solipsism?
Oh, a malaprop. The mistaken use of a word in place of a similar sounding one, often with unintentionally amusing effect.
Yes.
I love those. But yeah, no, and he's a great character for that. And he also, like, I don't know, he has this aloof quality about him. I don't know if that's just like from the way he looks, or if he just can. I'll give him more credit as an actor. He just knows how to play that part, but he's great at it.
Yeah. So couple of quick scenes to follow where Johnny's not feeling great. Ginny's there as well. She talks to this ex-doctor, and he gives his theory about why he's smoking and that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Then
it's so funny that she's going to him, and like there's like I think there is a quick shot of the doctor like looking at like, oh, what the fuck, like they're not respecting the actual doctor. They're going to he's like a prison orderly, but I mean I guess he was a doctor. But it's just a fun little detail there. And yeah, that's where he kind of says like, oh, the smoking thing, it's, you know, John was a boss, and this is kind of just a small way of taking control over his own death and having, you know, some sort of choice in what's happening.
Yeah. And so then we have Christopher with his actual baby. I don't think we've seen before. In the Soprano house, and they're about to leave, and Carmilla's there with the baby, and she kind of can't stop herself from telling Christopher off. Probably would have been better for everyone if she didn't bring up this, but she mentions that, you know, it's clearly about Tony and about Adriana and everything, and he doesn't like what she's inferring, and I think he plays it very cool and everything, and he probably should have just left it there, but he doesn't. Goes off to beat up the writer and tell him that he has to tell Tony that it was his idea. And when he's doing that, I'm just like trying to imagine in what situation that can possibly come up. And he just kind of has to construct that situation. And he does a fairly good job of it. And it probably would have worked if he didn't have a fucking scar on his head, because he just got beaten up, and Tony knows Christopher. I think he just puts everything together.
Yeah. And I mean, in between that, there's another there's a scene with Johnny and Feldman where he kind of concurs with the prognosis that things don't look good, and maybe there isn't years to have here. I guess and again, going back to like stupid TV tropes, and I guess what other shows would do, and maybe they've trained me to expect stupid things. But there's that moment when he's telling Johnny about the hit that happened, like how, you know, what does he say? Torchiano got hit. I'm expecting it to like give Johnny some reason to live or something. Like, what? They hit him? How could they? And then all of a sudden he like gets the fire and vigor back in him, and you know, at least hangs on for a bit longer to make sure the family has leadership. But no, of course, like that's not. Why would that happen?
Yeah, exactly. So then we have the two scenes where Christopher goes and threatens the writer. So like he says, not only does he not get credit for his own ideas, he has to pass off Christopher's shit ideas as his own. And yeah, he does it. Goes to the Bing and just kind of hangs out and says that it was all inspired by this other film. And it's a bit unnatural. Tony does see through it, but he does go home and watch the film. And there is someone in a dressing gown yelling a lot. Like, I assume that is the film, right? That's why he's watching it.
I agree. Yeah, it's got to be. And you're right. I feel like it would almost have worked even in a way that like Tony knows it's not true, but he'll use it to save face. But just the fact that it's just so obvious because he's got a big gash by his eye that, all right, you were told, like, this makes it even more true because Christopher clearly, made you come and tell me this. So it makes it more clear to Tony that it's him. What the hell was the movie they watched too? Shit, do they even have it listed here? I had it pulled up before, but
let's see. Nope, it's not this. It's got to be somewhere in here. I don't know. I don't have it.
I'll look it up later. Don't worry about it. Sorry.
Born Yesterday. It's from the film Born Yesterday, supposedly.
Yes. Okay. And I almost have to wonder, like, is there some real inspiration for Tony Soprano from that? Are they pulling from? Are they getting a little meta there? Because it is great that it does fully work. I do give him credit for pulling that out of his ass to try to make Tony believe it was real. But it's just what pushes Tony. Because then are we with Melfi after that? After Tony watches the movie?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's got to be some real inspiration behind there. Just opening up the article here from Born Yesterday, it's says that it got censored a lot. They couldn't even have them say the word broad, so it can't be very close to The Sopranos, but it's exactly the type of era and pool of movies that I feel like they pull from for Tony Soprano, but it doesn't convince Tony. And the next scene with Melfi is quite touching, I would say. He's actually hurt, as Melfi states, like, "Oh, you're hurt," like, and he's like, "Yeah," and he's crying, and it's like he's seen through it, and he's not mad for once. He's just sad.
Yeah, I agree. It's very real, but also it's kind of like, but it's because that's what you are, Tony. You are a bully. Like, I know you're remembering when you pushed him on his bike or whatever it was when they had like good times. Chris does remember those as well because he's brought them up, but he also remembers that then when Tony B showed up, Tony Egg showed up, you bullied him and made fun of him. And we've seen this happen many a times. But yeah, he does state basically this is the image of me that he leaves the world. And, this is what he thinks of me. Like he wants me dead. And I get it. It obviously would hurt, but he's still not quite grasping his own responsibility in that.
That's true. Maybe, he does turn a bit towards anger when he's like, all I did for this kid and he hates me so much. And as Melfi points out, he probably does love you too, which I think is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty rough. And as he says also, which is something I forget about, but Christopher is Carmela's cousin, and his father was like the Tony to Tony. He was like his mentor. And so there's a lot of connections. Anyway, it ends on the line there where she says that it's, maybe he's just reading too much into it. And Tony says that I've been coming here for years, which I'm so sick of him hearing him say. He's been saying that since season 2. But he says, I've been coming here for years. I know too much about the subconscious now, which is a better twist because usually he says, I've been coming here for years. Why am I not better? This is bullshit. But now he says, I know too much about the subconscious, meaning Christopher wrote this into the film. Even if he didn't mean to, it's still the image he has of me put up there for everyone to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that, we have Johnny's scene with his family. And yeah, I mean, was Johnny Sack in the first, was he in the pilot? Because I think his first scene is remember Tony takes Carm out to a nice restaurant to make up for something. And then he's at the bar talking to Johnny Sack, and she's like, yeah, I thought we were going out to dinner, not me, you, and Johnny fucking Sack. If it's not the pilot, it's one of the early episodes, obviously. But yes, character we've been with for a long time. And as you mentioned, even enough where we've seen enough of his family and his daughters and stuff like that. And it really is, he's gotten to the point where he's out of sight, out of mind with everyone, where, no one knows this is happening, and it's he's scared. It's scary. It's sad. He mentions his mother. Ginny, I guess, does go through the bargaining stage where she almost wants to offer him a cigarette because maybe he won't go.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah, and this is in the same episode that has like all the hilarious Cleaver stuff. So they're really like slaloming between emotions here and doing it very well. Johnny Sack's first scene is in the 6th episode, Pax
Okay.
Soprana.
All right.
But he's
a little too early, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's season 1 at least.
They keep introducing characters and going like, "Hey, you've been around forever," but he actually has been around forever. So yeah, this is him going out, and he got great scene, and the brother-in-law there comes over and tells everyone. They have some drinks in his honor, and usually in these scenes, I'm like, didn't you try to kill each other at some point? But water under the bridge.
And yeah, I do want to, and especially obviously pretty much every actor is great on this show, but yeah, Vincent Curatola as Johnny Sack, like amazing, like great performance, like through the end, between his always great moments where he'd get mad and his voice would raise, because I think it's him that's like, yeah, what are we, the fucking UN now?
Yeah.
Or I think when I forget if he's I don't know if he's on the toilet when he does that, because I'm remembering the scene when he's on the toilet like smoking a cigarette, getting mad. But then when he talks about raining a shitstorm like you've never seen, like a lot of great classic lines. And yeah, I mean, this scene's great too. Like, just you could see the fear in his eyes and all that. But yeah, then we got, like you said, we're at the Bing. They have a toast to him, and Paulie makes it about how he beat cancer.
Yeah, I'm always like, what is Paulie talking about? And I think everyone else is too, because he says some weird quote. I think I have it here. Ride the painted pony, let the spinning wheel glide. And everyone just kind of looks at him.
Yeah, and I guess he's misquoting something. He's misquoting a Blood, Sweat, and Tears song, Spinning Wheel. I guess he's saying it wrong. But yeah, and it just, I guess that's a way to let us know that Paulie's cancer is not a thing to worry about anymore. But it is, it is also a Paulie move to bring that up for him. Like, I beat cancer, he didn't. That's how it goes. And I mean, he had his own history with Johnny Sack where he thought he was maybe next in line, and then I guess he has hated him ever since. Yeah. So it works.
Sure does. And so we're back with Phil, and like, again, I'm like, Phil's holding this speech about his brother, the guy who got killed by Tony Egg, and for half of the scene, I'm like, is he not talking about Johnny Sack? Like, because obviously he doesn't care that much about Johnny Sack. His estimation's fallen so much, but like, he's actually like, there's a big like memorial thing, and I'm just confused by the fact that it's not about Johnny Sack, but no, it's to bring up again the pain that he had to suffer with his brother. And they have this long talk. Well, yeah, he holds this speech to a bunch of kids about the family name and changing the name at Ellis Island and everything. And I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm sure that did happen, but also a lot of people would voluntarily change their names too to something that's more consumable in the Americas, as far as my understanding. So this sort of rage of like, they were upset and they made us change our name to a fucking skirt, like that's part, or like to a fucking dancing outfit. It's like the rage there is partially misplaced, I feel. But yeah, they changed it to Leotardo, and it's a great story, and it's enough to give him the fighting spirit that we didn't get from Johnny. It's very clear by the end that he's like, no more of this shit by the end of it. And I honestly feel like Johnny dying had nothing to do with it. Did Phil even notice?
Yeah, no, I don't. He does kind of look at his picture after, so they do acknowledge that he is aware of it. But I mean, one of the big takeaways from this is the fact he's having a birthday party for his dead brother.
Yeah.
I mean, not to stake that. I mean, obviously that's a big deal, but it's just the fact that they have a cake and all the candles on it and everything are lit. Like, that says so much about Phil as a character and how like important this is. And, he puts his ashes up above the bar. And I love that there's this, like, the way he's like holding court, and it's like almost a classroom. the
Yeah.
way it's like all his nieces and nephews or what have you, and they have to like raise their hand, and he calls on them, and he's like quizzing them and stuff like that. And yeah, but I like that there's this, it's, I guess, this fire is building between regret. Like he talks about how, he kept his mouth shut for what? Because some of these pieces of shit that I've protected. And, of course, going back to his brother Billy and how that all shaked out. What is his legacy? What is he going to be remembered as? The guy who made the wrong decisions in some of these biggest moments in his life, or is he going to do something about it?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like he's gonna do something about it the way it ends there, and I'm like, yeah, momentum. That's the thing you're always happy about, and it's also like this Weasley character that was introduced at the end of last part of season that came in like, we should kill Tony Soprano, and then he slides up next to him, Phil, and just talks about this shit and about how Phil's a real man, and like we said, he's regretting it, etc. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a very well. We almost skipped the last scene here where there's the actual christening of Christopher's son. Great connection to, Tony talking about when he was a baby and holding him. And they have this nice connection and like look at each other's eyes. And he's the godfather. He's actually the godfather now.
Yeah.
And they have a big hug. And then we kind of see Christopher going like, ooh. And we see Tony go like, because it's all like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, he's godfather by default, both in being the godfather of the family. And I mean, is Chris going to pick someone else to be the godfather of his child? Of course not. But there's, things are brimming there. Things aren't quite as good as they should be. And we'll see what that means for the rest of the season.
Yep. So before we wrap up, I don't know if we should do this email now or just kind of save emails and do them all in a special episode or something. What do you think, Jim? Or should we just go through some of this now?
I completely forgot that you had mentioned that there was an email for this one. You know what? Let's do it. Let's do it now.
Okay, it's just because it mainly goes into stuff from the previous seasons. But yeah, this is from Mikey, who says, "Hi guys, I know I'm late to the party, but I recently got into podcasts as I listened to them all day at work. As an avid Sopranos fan, I decided to rewatch the series and see if I could find a podcast that is doing the same. I'm glad to have spent this past summer rewatching and listening to you guys break it down. It's also especially great that Jacob hasn't seen it before because I find myself wondering what someone who doesn't know what's next is thinking." And Mikey sent us some trivia here of stuff we've talked about, so I'll just read them out for you in a bit of a summary. The actor who plays Vito appeared in season 1 as the guy Christopher tells to take a walk so he could shoot the bakery cashier in the foot. So if you rewatch that scene, Vito's in there. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm almost positive I did mention that in one of our discussions, but yes, it is a fun little factoid. The one, his name's he's a different character's name, but yeah, he comes in and it's him, and he tells him to get the fuck out of there so he can shoot the baker in the foot.
Yep. And so another quick one. This is just kind of trivia from season 2. When Richie gets shot, as his chair is falling backwards, you can see a hand come up from under the table and grab the chair. So we may need to look at that.
Yeah, that I haven't seen that, so that's interesting. I'd like to check that out.
Yeah. Season 3, I remember you guys talking about the scene where they go to the funeral director after Olivia dies. What's great about this scene is if you watch The Godfather, it's almost the same scene when Sonny dies and Don Vito goes to the funeral director, except Tony and Janice get into it and it goes hilariously off the rails.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, interesting parallel there. And season 4, when Janice and Bobby sit down to dinner, a lot of fans thought the ghost of Karen moves Janice wine glass. What? I don't know what the seed is. A lot of fans thought the.
I'm sorry. I'll finish that. That's the thought.
A lot of fans thought the ghost of Karen moves Janice's wine glass as they're about to eat her last ziti. And it says, I always believe she just moved the placemat, but who knows? So I have the scene here. It's 10 seconds. I'm just gonna watch it real quick and give my estimation. Okay, the wine is okay. Well, that. All right,
It's
Sopranos fans are stupid if that's a big discussion. She's
I
clearly
haven't-
just moving the wine.
I was just say I'm not watching the scene, but I would almost just from reading it, I would gather maybe it's just like also continuity flubs happen all the time when you're shooting takes or even in the editing room. You want to use a specific take, but you think it's just something where she moves it.
No, I thought that too. I thought it was a continuity error, but it's a one shot. It's just her hand is out of frame and the wine glass moves seemingly without anyone moving it. But like they wouldn't just have a ghost, like that wouldn't be an intentional thing. So they clearly used this take because it had the best acting, and she just happens to move it, and you don't see the hand. And they didn't think that people online would say it was a ghost.
Okay, what else we got?
Okay. Season 5, when Tony is chasing Phil for his money, the song Rock the Cash Bar is playing, which is hilarious because it's a song inspired by the ban on Western music in Iran. Mikey, you're going really deep here. Song inspired by the ban of Western music in Iran after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, and Tony always calls Phil the Shah of Iran.
Yeah, they have called him the Shah of Iran before. So
I remember that. And I Googled that, and I was like, yeah, it does look similar.
That is a deep cut.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it for the trivia. Also in here, he says, I love the storm out and death counters, although you guys never counted one of my favorite storm outs from the season 3 finale when Tony storms out of the bedroom after fighting with Carm. To me, this is definitely a legit storm out. He did include the scene as well. We need to review that.
Let me pull it up. Do we need to add it to the... Let me see.
Submit Audie Murphy was Army of One.
Is that what we're preparing him for? A career in the military?
No. One day at a time.
You want to train him to be a professional killer?
Oh, will you stop? They're soldiers. And the United States Army never goes to war anymore.
They were marching with rifles, Tony.
They're symbolic. The barrels are plugged.
Symbolic of what?
Respect.
He will be subjected to the discipline of kids hardly older than himself. Does that seem smart? Boys his age still kill frogs and small animals.
The Cusamanos binky. The cherry bomb with the nails in it. You think it was AJ?
No, that is what I'm trying to tell you. He is still a child. He's a normal child. He's made some mistakes, and God knows he's got a shitload to learn about life. That does not mean that I'm going to let you send him to the type of school whose whole reason for being is to make him follow orders by instilling fear.
He thinks the world owes him a fucking living.
What could have given him that bizarre idea?
We tried it your way for 15 years now. With the Barry Brazelton and the validating his feelings. And that fucking school did the same thing. And what a surprise. He thinks the world runs on his feelings. Well, he's going to go learn to be a man.
I will not send him to that place.
Oh, no, fuck that.
Oh, yeah,
Allow
okay,
me.
I remember now.
Jim, if we didn't count this, oh my god.
Yeah,
Are we sure we didn't count this? Because
that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if we actually counted it though.
it seems like we would have, but maybe we just didn't think about it because sometimes we skip a death and we're like, oh yeah, that guy died. So we could definitely have missed the fact that there's a storm out, but that is such a storm out. It should obviously count.
I'm gonna count it now, and we'll have to go back. I'll go back and listen to this episode to see if we count it or not. If we did count it, I'll have to take it off of the board. But right now, I'm gonna put it on the board.
Yeah.
Let me see. Where's the? Okay, here we go.
Fuck you.
Oh, it's been so long since I've heard that
so
sweet
long.
fuck you. We're at 17 storm outs for the moment. Then
We didn't. We completely forgot to put fucking Johnny Sack on the death counter though. So we
Fuck.
could add another one to the death counter.
let's do it.
Puts us up at 68.
Did anyone else die this episode? It seems like we always don't. I can't believe we're arguing. Like, did we not count that storm out? And a main character dies this episode, and we don't count it. Clearly, we didn't count the storm out, Jim.
Wait, we didn't count Jerry Torchiano, I don't think, dude.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah.
We get caught up in the deaths because we're just like discussing it. But yeah, we also got to put Jerry Torchiano up on the fucking death counter. So we did get one extra on the storm out, so we got to add 2 to the death.
Yeah. And more importantly, we've now reached the sex number. It's 69 deaths, everybody. Woo! That's pretty much it. Mikey wraps up with saying, I am now going to watch along with you guys once per week until the end. Thanks for reading. Thank you for sending in your email. You can reach us. What's the address, Jim?
Oh, you can email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter, shows what you know. That's you, the letter U, shows what you know on Twitter.
Very true. And once again, that's showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. We also have launched our new show, Real History, is available at showswhatyouknow.com. You can also find all of our other shows there, like Blank Meets Blank, and coverage of shows like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, coming back pretty much now. A fantastic show. We try to mention it every episode. And besides that, what else is there, Jim? I think there's one thing, Jim.
Oh, well, there's just one more thing left to say, and that is cut to black.
Cut to black.